I gave $2 million to my MIL. The next day, I came home to find she had disappeared with the money. But Mom, what's that? My daughter, Sydney, asked, her voice trembling. We had just returned from my parents' house, and a horrifying sight greeted us. Piles of trash bags, overflowing with our belongings, lay strewn across our front porch. As we approached, I saw our possessions carelessly tossed together, like garbage. What is this? Why is this happening? I exclaimed, confusion and anger swirling within me. Sydney, tears welling in her eyes, pulled out her beloved stuffed animal from one of the bags and hugged it tightly. Frustrated, I marched towards the entrance, only to find the locks had been changed. It was clear. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law, Madeline, were behind this. I rang the doorbell, then pounded on the door, but there was no response. What is this? Isn't it terrible? I muttered, my voice laced with disbelief. Upon closer inspection, I found a note tucked inside one of the bags. It read, "Parasites disappear. Never come back." Anger surged through me, a fiery torrent. The real parasites are you, I shouted, my voice raw with fury. This was the worst treatment I had ever received from my in-laws in 17 years. The unbearable sting of their actions was compounded by the fact that they were making my daughter feel this way too. My patience, exhausted, boiled over. I loaded our belongings into the car, and we returned to my parents' house. I will never come back to that house again, I declared, my voice filled with a newfound resolve. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens to the parasites when their host is gone. My name is Naomi, and I am currently 45 years old. I live with my husband, Blake, our daughter, Sydney, and my husband's mother and sister. I can't say we live happily. I work from home, but this house is never peaceful. The issue lies with my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, Madeline. They have disliked and ignored me for over 12 years. As Sydney grew up, it bothered me less and less. I mainly work as a personal consultant. I started as a fortune teller, but as my blog gained popularity, I began getting more questions about attracting customers. This led to my current job. I met Blake through a friend's introduction when I was training to be a fortune teller. Blake works in sales at a pharmaceutical company and also does affiliate marketing as a side job, which is finally starting to take off. He gave me great advice on attracting customers when I struggled with fortune telling. Attracted by his kindness, we started dating and got married a year later. Our income wasn't great at that time, but Blake always supported me. I'm so glad I married Blake. I truly felt this way. Living with my in-laws started about a year after we got married. It began when my father-in-law, who had been healthy, suddenly passed away. My mother-in-law felt insecure about the future and asked my husband to live with us. We agreed to live together in exchange for her taking care of the household chores. At first, my mother-in-law welcomed us and was happy. I hoped we would get along well, but I was wrong. 4 months later, she began completely ignoring me, perhaps because she was unhappy that I wasn't helping with the housework. Soon, my sister-in-law, Madeline, also started ignoring me. I didn't mind being ignored, but my mother-in-law's tendency to involve others was challenging. Not only did Madeline hear about it, but even neighbors and relatives were informed that my daughter-in-law stays at home but says she's working, leaving all the housework to me. If I stayed even a little, she would talk back 100-fold, so I just ignored her. To make matters worse, my mother-in-law would suggest to others, "You better not talk to her too. It'll be troublesome." As a result, people around the in-law house began giving me only cold responses to my greetings. I felt isolated, and it became very difficult. Despite my pleas to stop spreading strange rumors, my words were completely ignored. Although my mother-in-law's attitude softened slightly when my daughter, Sydney, was born 3 years after we started living together, her overall stance towards me hardly changed. However, she was very fond of Sydney, and having her help with household chores and childcare was a huge relief as my work became busier. Around the same time, my husband, Blake's side business started to struggle, and he seemed unable to adapt to changes in the affiliate marketing market. He approached me, saying, "Naomi, can you increase your contribution to the monthly expenses a bit?" I agreed and mentioned that my consultations were increasing and my new methods were working well. Even though I was willing to help boost his sales, Blake insisted on handling it alone, saying, "I think I'll try it on my own. I'm really sorry." From the start of our marriage, we agreed that Blake would manage the household finances. At first, my income was low, so he allowed me to contribute more. When my sales increased, I would transfer money to Blake based on my monthly earnings, and he would give me a fixed amount for living expenses in cash. Initially, I could only contribute $300, but now I could transfer up to $3,000, though not every month. I could contribute more if I didn't need to put money into savings. I knew Blake was struggling with his side business, but his pride kept him from asking for my help. He started spending more time at cafes after work, coming home later and later. When Sydney was about 5, Madeline got married and moved out. Since she lived nearby, she often brought her son, Austin, to our house during the day. When Austin turned 1, Madeline said she wanted to start a part-time job, and my mother-in-law happily offered to take care of him until the evening. Madeline was grateful, saying, "Thank you, I'm so happy." As my mother-in-law started caring for Austin at home, she became very fond of him and began being cold towards Sydney. When they fought, my mother-in-law would scold Sydney and compare her unfavorably to Austin. Over time, Sydney started playing near me and began to dislike my mother-in-law's behavior. I spoke up, saying, "Talk to your mother, Sydney. Austin and Sydney are both her grandchildren. She should treat them the same. Sydney is already a big sister in elementary school." However, my mother-in-law's focus shifted, and she approached me, saying, "Things are tough at the company right now. We might not get bonuses, so could you contribute a bit more?" Despite the challenges, my blog's client attraction was successful, and I started receiving more consultations as a consultant, earning far more than I did as a fortune teller. When Blake asked for additional financial support, I responded, "I'm already contributing $4,000 a month. Isn't that enough?" "Yeah, I'm embarrassed to say, but my salary has decreased, and the side business isn't going well." "Don't be secretive," I said. "We are a couple. We should support each other in tough times. I'm really ashamed." Later, the amount I contributed gradually increased, and eventually, I was transferring $5,000 a month to Blake. Still, not wanting to hurt his pride, I let Blake continue to manage the finances. When Sydney was in 7th grade, Madeline came back home with Austin. It seems Madeline got divorced due to her infidelity, but I don't know the details. By this time, Sydney could help around the house, so household chores were divided among each family member. Being ignored by my mother-in-law, and Madeline continued, but it no longer bothered me. It's unfortunate that I couldn't give Sydney her own room when she started middle school, as Madeline's return meant we ran out of rooms. One night, while discussing which tutoring school Sydney should attend for middle school, Madeline suddenly said, "Hey, tutoring is expensive. Why doesn't Sydney study by herself?" "Could you stop making such comments?" I snapped. "I'm paying for the tutoring, so it's none of your business what Naomi is paying." "Impossible," Madeline scoffed. "You don't earn anything. Blake is supporting you. You're just a leech, aren't you?" "Haha, you married him because he has money, right?" "Exactly," chimed in my mother-in-law. "Blake told me not to speak ill of Naomi. But that's just shameless." My mind was filled with questions. What does this mean? What has Blake been telling his mother and the others? Blake is the one supporting this house financially. It's about time we put an end to the parasite's lifestyle. I feel bad for Sydney, but if we pay for her tutoring, we won't be able to pay my compensation. Not be able to pay? Madeline questioned, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Are you saying our house is paying for your compensation?" "Madeline, Blake said he would pay for it. I retorted. You should spend your money on Austin. I began to understand the deception and felt my anger rising. My husband had always managed our household finances, and my mother-in-law had taken care of the household chores and childcare until Sydney grew up, so I thought they knew I was also contributing to the household expenses. Is Blake bearing all the expenses of this house, including your living expenses and the compensation Madeline is supposed to pay? I asked, my voice trembling with suppressed fury. Be quiet, my mother-in-law snapped. It's only natural for a family. You're the only outsider here, not related by blood, and yet you act as if living here is your right. It really makes me angry. I contribute money too, I shouted, my anger reaching a boiling point. What you contribute is barely enough for your own food expenses, my mother-in-law sneered. You hardly have any income, and yet you're so arrogant. I could feel my body trembling with anger. I could see Sydney on the side, looking like she might cry. I knew Blake had a lot of pride, but I never thought it would be this bad. In the beginning, Blake was paying for the living expenses and pocket money for my mother-in-law and Madeline, but I had started contributing as well. Now, we were living on my income. I needed to talk to Blake properly. Around midnight, Blake came home. He was drunk and seemed cheerful. Can we talk? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I didn't know you weren't getting any money from your mother or Madeline. They said you're covering all the expenses of this house. Oh, about that. Blake chuckled, his voice slurring. My bad. It's a matter of pride, as a man, you know. When we started living together, I was paying for everything. There wasn't a right moment to say you were also paying, and in front of the family, let me be the eldest son a little, please. Blake, with a light-hearted tone, like in a comedy sketch, put his hands together. Oh, that's right. I'm going to Faye this Saturday. I'll be gone for a week. Take care, Faye. Why, I got invited to a pedal in Faye by a friend I'm doing a side business with. I'm going to make it a success, so cheer for me, Naomi. Well, I'm off to sleep. See you tomorrow. My husband laid down on the mattress in a cheerful mood and soon started snoring. My anger wouldn't subside. But recently, with Blake coming home late, we hadn't talked much, and I had no idea about this. I thought he was joking while drunk. But on the weekend, Blake really left with a large suitcase. During Blake's absence, I had the freedom to use the car, so I decided to take Sydney back to my parents' house the next day. A shocking event awaited us. Mom, what is that? Sydney asked, her eyes wide with fear. When Sydney and I returned to my parents' house, there were piles of trash bags in front of the entrance. Upon closer inspection, these bags contained mine and Sydney's belongings, carelessly packed like real trash. What is this? Why is this happening? I don't understand, I exclaimed, my voice cracking with disbelief. Sydney, crying, pulled out her beloved stuffed animal from the bag and hugged it. Furious, I headed towards the entrance. Had the lock changed? It seemed that the locks had been changed while we were out. This must be the work of my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, Madeline. I rang the doorbell and knocked several times, but no one came out. What is this? Isn't it terrible? I muttered, my voice filled with despair. Upon closer inspection, one of the trash bags had a note saying, "Parasites disappear. Never come back." I felt a surge of anger from the bottom of my heart. The real parasites are you. I couldn't help but let out a swear word. This was the worst treatment I had ever received from my in-laws in 17 years. They weren't just hurting me, but also making my daughter feel this way. I finally lost my patience. Boiling with anger, I loaded the luggage into the car, and we returned to my parents' house. I will never come back to that house again, I declared, my voice filled with a newfound resolve. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens to the parasites when their host is gone. When we returned to my parents' house, they were shocked. I hadn't told them about being ignored by my in-laws, the money issues, or their attitude towards Sydney. Not wanting to worry them, I had kept it all to myself. There's no need to go back to that house, my father said, his voice filled with righteous anger. You should claim compensation from them. My parents cried with anger and told me to stay with them. My mother's words, "You really had it tough," made me cry too. In reality, I had been trying my best all this time. Enough is enough. I finally decided to confront my feelings while staying at my parents' house. I contacted a friend who had introduced me to Blake. She was connected to Blake's side business. Are you doing well? I want to ask you something. Do you know if Blake's friends are currently in Faye, that famous entrepreneur pedal? Right? I was invited, but I wasn't interested, so I declined. Blake didn't go, did he? Yeah, that's right. By the way, I heard Blake quit his job and is now managing a business with his wife. You two must be close. Ah, yes, that's right, I replied, nonchalant, and hung up immediately after. I called Blake's company. What my friend said was true, and to my surprise, Blake had quit his job 3 years ago. This meant that for the past 3 years, I had been paying almost all of the living expenses for my in-laws. Looking back over the years, I suddenly felt hollow. A week later, I received a laid-back message from Blake, saying he was back in the USA. After continuously ignoring him, I stopped hearing from him altogether. He must have heard the news back home, expecting persistent contact from Blake. I hired a detective to investigate him. The investigation revealed that Blake dressed in a suit in the morning, spent his afternoons gambling, and evenings at a woman's house. So, I asked for an investigation into his infidelity as well. 2 weeks later, Blake called me. It must have been close to his former company's payday, and he was panicking. Naomi, sorry I couldn't contact you. I'm sorry for what my family did. I heard they kicked you out, and I was thinking, why did it come to this? Really, did you tell the truth to your mother and Madeline? Blake quickly changed the subject and said something unbelievable. Let's leave that house and live in a new home, just the 3 of us. I'll cut ties with those who disregard you, Naomi. I'm ready to abandon my mother and Madeline, so please come back. Are you really cutting ties with your mother and Madeline? I asked, my voice laced with disbelief. I was disappointed in Blake and his self-centered actions, so I told him, I'm coming back for now, so leave the door unlocked. Blake seemed delayed in responding to my message. A few days later, I returned to my in-laws' house with Sydney. Blake, his mother, and Madeline were there. But Austin was nowhere to be seen. I was relieved that Austin didn't have to witness the adults' ugly arguments. When Blake made some remarks, I ignored the displeased pair and took out a divorce form from my bag. I confronted the surprised Blake. I heard you quit your job without telling me. Since we're supposedly managing a business together, does that mean the $5,000 I've been transferring every month was actually your salary? Blake tried to excuse himself. No, that's not it. I told you the business was in trouble, right? So, I decided to quit before getting fired. Really? I heard you quit 3 years ago, right? I called your company, and it's still not bankrupt. Blake fell silent. I pressed further. By the way, what role do you play in our joint business management? Are you the accountant? Blake became increasingly uneasy and started sweating. Blake is supporting the whole family, isn't he, Mother? I said, my voice rising. He quit his job. His side business isn't going well, and yet it's a mystery where the money is coming from. I'm leaving, but please continue to get financial support from Blake. My mother-in-law and Madeline's faces turned pale. But the other day on the phone, you were crying and begging to save only yourself, saying you'd cut ties with your mother and sister. Haha, but that won't happen. I'm also discarding Blake here. What do you mean? I don't understand, Blake stammered. Blake hasn't been going to work. That's a lie. He leaves in a suit, and Naomi was supporting the household. It's true. Naomi has been paying for everything for years. I'm unemployed now and not doing any side business. We're going to have a hard life because you kicked Naomi out. We could have had an easy life without working if you hadn't done anything unnecessary. What do you mean by that? You were planning to abandon us, weren't you? Blake's response made my mother-in-law and Madeline furious, and they started arguing. While they caused a commotion, Sydney and I began to take action. I came to pick up some forgotten items. A cleaning robot bought within the last 5 months, an expensive microwave favored by my mother-in-law, and the beauty device Madeline had gotten from Blake. Wait, that's mine. This is mine. Madeline shrieked, her voice filled with panic. Since I bought it with my money, or you can pay me back for it, I said, my voice cold and unwavering. Madeline fell silent at my words. Then I searched for and gathered my belongings from their rooms. The items they had put out did not include my expensive brand bags and accessories. Why are you taking that too? This is mine. Madeline cried, her voice laced with desperation. I ignored their complaints and sweet talk. Finally, I dropped a bombshell on Blake. Oh, I forgot. I plan to claim compensation from your mistress, Jasmine. Tell her it's no use running away. What? How do you know about her? Blake sputtered, his face turning ashen. I know you went to Faye with Jasmine recently. Good for you, right? Of course, I have all the evidence of the affair, so no escaping that. No way. You've been deceiving me and having fun for the past 3 years. I shouted, my voice filled with anger and betrayal. I'll be claiming compensation for the affair, child support for Sydney, and oh, you were secretly paying Madeline's compensation too. I'll be claiming that back as well. As I prepared to leave, my mother-in-law and Madeline desperately tried to stop me. We were wrong, Naomi. I'm sorry. We just believed what Blake said. We can't live without you. We'll do anything. Please help us. I can't pay you back for the compensation. I'm sorry too. I apologize for everything. You'll forgive us, right? I couldn't help but laugh at their foolish faces. They finally realized who had been supporting their lifestyle. Realizing too late that their non-blood related support was gone. Let's just ignore these people, Mom. Let's go home. Yes, that's right. I agreed, my voice firm and resolute. Blake, you'll be hearing from the lawyer soon. Please take care of it. Leaving a dejected Blake behind, we returned home with the items we had collected. Later, my divorce with Blake was finalized, and I demanded compensation through a lawyer. I received many apologies and pleas for reconciliation from my mother-in-law and Madeline, but I ignored them all. Surprisingly, there was still some inheritance left from Blake's father. The fact that they had been living off my money without using their own made me angry again. However, the inheritance wasn't enough for the compensation, and ultimately, they had to sell the house to make a lump sum payment. Naturally, this included the compensation I had been paying for Madeline. After selling the house, I don't know what became of Blake's family. I hope Blake can take care of his family, but ultimately, he will choose his own path. I'd also claimed compensation from Blake's mistress, which led to an unexpected revelation through the lawyer. I informed her that Blake was unemployed and I had been supporting the family. Blake had deceived her, claiming he was an entrepreneur with a successful business. They broke up after an argument. Sydney and I moved to an apartment, and I was able to give her the room she had longed for. I don't think my 17 years were wasted, but sometimes I wonder if I should have made a decision when I started being ignored. Now, I feel happy that my home is a peaceful place.